Yeah.
On this red one. I think you're right there on the corner, Don.
And I do believe that.
I'm there. You're right on the corner.
So I'm thinking that it's time for our first to follow the road, and then we will have a moment of silence and you get introductions on that, and then I'll turn the meeting on to Councilman Williams to call this meeting.
Madam Mayor, Mayor O'Neill,
I am present.
Mayor Pro Tem Burton,
I'm here.
Councilmember Balaguero, Councilmember Freeman, Councilmember Holton Harmon, President, Councilmember Johnson, and Councilmember Williams. Okay, I'm going to call the planning commission, Austin Amendolia,
Here.
Kim Cameron, Nate Baker,
Here.
Sarah Shivers, here, Gary Cutright, Brandon Davis, Scott McIver,
Here.
David Morgan,
Here.
Anthony Cease,
Here.
Raymond Trapp, Stephen Valentine,
Present.
Carmen Williams, here, and Missouri Williams. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'd like to have a moment of silence to consider our very important special meeting. Thank you all. I do believe that Councilwoman Freeman indicated that she would be in the speak after the night. She did not. I'd like to put it on. Thank most for that. So most second, and it was my Councilman Freeman, second by Councilwoman Holton Harmon. All those in favor of the time of aye. Having all those opposed, have the same right. Hearing none, after this meeting. I'd like to thank you all who are here in person at our beautiful water management facility out here in Durham on the far end of Durham. I'd like to say thank you to the staff who have joined us tonight. City staff who joined us tonight, and those who run this facility to keep our water safe and this beautiful place maintained. We thank them for allowing us to come out here and hold this meeting. We also want to welcome those who are joining us on the internet and our public who are here with us playing community all the time. They see them, but we have actually folks who followed us out here tonight, and we're glad that they are here with us as well. I'd like to welcome you to this conversation. We will hold a conversation tonight on and it's for all and that housing and development with our planning commission colleagues who are here for us tonight. I want to especially thank you all for the work that you've been follow this position, and you all it's a heavy lift, and that does not go unnoticed, and we appreciate you not only in what you do as a planning commission, but agree to meet with us as a special session. I would like to thank my colleague, Councilman Williams, for arranging this special meeting agenda on this Wednesday, March 1st, 2023, just in case I didn't say it formally. And I would now like to turn the meeting over to him.
All right, well, good evening, everybody, and thank you, Mayor O'Neill, for opening us up. Is a formal meeting because we are a meeting forum, but it is an opportunity for us to have a little less formal dialogue around civic housing and etc. So we'll get into that, but I think, you know, due to the fact that we have so many folks that are chiming in, I think it'll be appropriate for us to just kind of just quickly introduce who we are. Is that okay with you, Chair Amador? So I'll just kick off real quick. It's be really quick. I'm Councilmember Williams. I serve on the City Council. And go this way.
And you all know who I am.
Mark Anthony Middleton, American Community Savior.
Austin Amendola, I'm the chair of the Durham Planning
Sarah Shigeru, Planning Commission.
Scott McIver, Planning Commission. David Morgan, Planning Commission.
Tony Seuss, Planning Commission.
Stephen Valentine, Planning Commission.
Dave Baker, Planning Commission.
Alexander Cato, Planning Department.
Sarah Young, Planning Department. Grace Smith, Planning Department.
Reginald Johnson, Community Development Department.
Donald Tool, City Attorney's Office.
Wanda Page, Durham City Manager. Anisha Wallace, City Manager's Office. Bertha Johnson, Deputy City Manager. Larissa Williamson, County Attorney's Office. And Kim Rayburn, City Attorney. And I guess last but not least, back on time, closing time at large.
Thank you all so much. So as I stated tonight, Mr. Amador and I had just had some conversation around the need for these two bodies to really come together and just have a little dialogue around the role that we play in the people's work. And as the public know that, it's been quite dynamic when it comes to housing, and especially between these two bodies. So the idea is for us to have this dialogue without totally in silence, and being able to, get a refresh on some major topics or departments, and then have a little open discussion around it. We could be here until it's time to be over, or we don't have to be here all that long. But at least, once again, we're able to come together, sort of get an idea of how we are thinking as individuals in the, appointed roles or elected roles, and understand how our bodies can work together versus how we're working together.
Yeah, I don't have much else to add on that. Councilmember Williams requested this meeting in November, December-ish, and has really led the charge to get this meeting going, but I'm happy for our bodies to have a discussion and engage in more dialogue on the issues that are facing our city and county.
So just so you can see the agenda, the format, we'll get a brief presentation from our staff, and then we'll open it up for discussion, perspective on that topic. And then we will have any questions or answers provided, and then we'll move to the next topic. So first up is from our Director of Planning, Director Sarah Young.
If y'all give me just 30 seconds, I gotta share it on the Zoom and then get back in front of you, so bear with me just a minute. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to be really brief. I was asked to do a planning refresh, and I have pulled a couple of slides from a presentation that I gave to the council as part of their deep dive series back in November that really talk about the types of development approvals and decisions and the roles that certain bodies have in them. So first up, a quick overview. There are three basic types of land use decisions or other types of decisions that are made locally. The first is legislative decisions. Those are things that you can see that are discretionary. In this case, the city council, the county commissioners also make those types of decisions. They are things that include rezonings, changing the zoning of a property, enacting ordinances, adopting official plans, those kind of things. We also have quasi-judicial decisions. So that's in that second category. These are evidentiary hearings. They run like a court of law. They do have prescribed findings and criteria that must be followed. And we have a few examples of those: the Historic Preservation Commission,
as well as the Board of Adjustment, make those type of decisions. And then the last type is administrative decisions. So these are things where there are already a set of rules in place, and it falls on the administrative staff to ensure compliance with those adopted rules. Things like, site plans and sign permits and all sorts of things. Yep, just hit the button. Response. So in terms of roles that we may be talking about tonight more specifically, we've got the planning department. You'll see that our job as a planning department is often to draft policies or ordinances or plans that conform to what we're hearing from the community, from our elected officials, and we present those to you all. The Joint City County Planning Committee is a group that is 3 city council members, 3 county commissioners, and the chair of the planning commission. And their function is a little bit different. They are advisory in terms of they discuss matters of joint interest between the city and the county when it comes to planning, and they provide guidance and direction to the planning staff, particularly like on our annual work program, what it is we're going to be working. You then have the planning commission. The planning commission is advisory only. So for state law, if we have zoning, then we have to have a planning commission. And the role of the planning commission is to review these legislative things that will come before the elected officials, make a recommendation to the elected officials on those items. And then, of course, we have city council and our county commissioners as well. Just remember, this was from a presentation given to council, but they're in the same bucket. They are the actual decision makers. They're the ones that have the authority under state law to enact policies, ordinances, etc., including changing the zoning of a parcel. So that is my super quick planning refresher. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you so much. So you all just be quick. We live this every day, so and real quick, so we're back here. It's really hard to hear up to the other side of the room, so we'll just speak up when we do the comments. So as you can see on the agenda, the format is just a quick blurb to set the tone, and then have a little discussion, a question and answer. Anyone? Any questions around the process for just from application to approval? Anybody need any refresh on that? All right, so I do have a question. Because we are pretty much the ones that are living this every day. So you may think, why is he asking this? But there are a lot of folks in the community that have no clue what's happening. They have no clue what's going on. They don't really understand the process. So this is an opportunity for us to also have a little discussion on behalf of the public, which we never really do. We actually function in silos and a part of a linear process. So my question would be the same one I always ask: why does it take so long to get an application from application to approval?
Sure. So and it depends on which application, but I presume you're talking about the things that come before you all, like a rezoning.
Yes.
So in a rezoning, the application comes in, staff reviews it. We review it for compliance with, how does it match up with adopted plans and policies? There is an iterative process where we will tell an applicant, hey, this particular thing is not in conformance with the ordinance, or how are you addressing this? And they have a chance to respond and amend their application. We do that for a couple of cycles, and then it gets docketed for the planning commission for a public hearing. The planning commission can continue a case, their deliberation on a case for up to 3 meeting cycles. Yeah, been a while. And then from there, it gets put on city council or county commissioner's agenda. So one of the things that eats up time is our reviews tend to run, anywhere, depending on our staffing level, 20 to 40 business days. However, applicants have up to 90 days to turn something back around. So applicants always have way more time than staff does with each round of review. So sometimes applicants will take that full time. Sometimes applicants ask us for extensions. They need more time to work through things. And then of course we have the cycles to get on agendas, right? But they're not instantaneous, there's lead time. And then we also sometimes just have so many cases like right now that we can't possibly get all the cases that are close to ready on a single agenda. So we just have to kind of space them out. So those are the variety of things that contribute to how long it takes to get something through the pipeline.
All right.
It sounds like we have some concerns about that. Maybe you.
Well, no, so a lot of the questions that you'll hear me ask are what I've heard in the public domain.
Okay,
Developers say it takes way too long. It takes, 2 to 3 years. And I can't always answer why. So part of it, it's like, all right, so, well, I'll ask my next question that'll sort of explain that. Director Young, is it possible to, do we have a mechanism that tracks an application throughout the process?
Yeah, Alexander, do you want to talk about how we track and what, I think it might be helpful to hear how our averages have changed.
Yes, absolutely. So we were working under a lot of pressures that, no surprise, with the COVID pandemic. There were a lot of applications that were already in the queue. There was a rush to submit a ton of applications at once when COVID hit. And then of course there was staffing challenge and shortage for a while. And so it was running about 15 months for a rezoning. Now we are down to less than a year. And I foresee that going even quicker. The trade-off is any time that there's less time for a project to be in that cycle, there is less time for the community to engage on it. So that's a little bit of the trade-off in that space. We are unique in that we allow engagement from the time an application is submitted to the time it's heard by y'all, not just at public hearings. But every time we do reduce that by efficiencies, which is what we have focused on, we do run into the fact that there's less time for the community to engage.
I have a question, because again, residents do say that it takes us a long time to get this done, and they compare us to other places, which I don't like. But is there barriers that you can say that you can kind of identify that maybe you can, some of these barriers that I guess is allowing this period of time, is there any barriers that you can kind of like do a needs assessment around and try to change that to kind of make it faster or not?
I mean, I will say that I wish that we could hold the development community to the same timeframes that we hold staff. I think that would speed things up a fair amount. But, oftentimes I think the development community is trying to work through things. There's aspects of development that staff isn't privy to, right? The financing behind a project or ownership issues. And while we try and make sure that folks have all their ducks in a row when they first come in, things happen that are beyond control. But those are details that are not shared with staff. So oftentimes we don't really know what's driving some of the delays on the development side. So it's hard for us to say. I can certainly respond about the things we control process wise. Yeah, I don't know, burden wise. I think that typically what we see, and I hear this often, that the process is prohibited for smaller scale developers. One of the things we've tried to do with the recent text amendment that changes development plans and allows pretty much anything that can be described in text form to be done that way. The intent behind that was really to remove the burden of cost associated with producing a development plan, and that's not the administrative fees. That's to draw up a development plan. You're going to a consultant. That consultant is going to charge you a lot of money Depending on the complexity of the project, $20, $40, $60, $80,000. That is very expensive. So that was an attempt to really address that issue and that burden.
I'd like to see if anyone from the planning commission has an answer to that question.
Yeah, I have one question. We touched upon it as far as the cost to the developer. What is the cost or fees assessed? I know it depends, I guess, upon the application, but what does it range from as far as the cost to the developer? Yeah, obviously they have their own costs with getting the development plan and other things too, but
So you're talking about the administrative fees. what
The
we as
administrative
staff
fees,
charge.
yeah.
Take that one because I was in that document today. So they range from just a little over $1,000 upwards to a base fee around $4,800. In addition to that $4,800, depending on what type of project it is, there might be an acreage fee, maybe $60 to $70 an acre. So if you have a very large project, the first 10 acres is the base fee, and then above that is an acreage fee for each acre above that. So the larger projects pay more, which is a good thing. But yeah,
I'm thinking like the Kent Road case itself. I know there's a lot of acreage in that. What was the?
I can't tell you the Kemp Road fee off the top of my head, but I can tell you that it was.
Yes.
Alexander Payne's acreage. I bet you can figure it real quick.
Yeah, it was around 25,000.
Okay. Thank you.
Could you repeat that, base fee for acreage?
So for a development plan, a graphic development plan, it's right around $4,800 base fee. That's just the ballpark. I just looked at the fee schedule today that we're proposing in the budget. So that's our new schedule. That's pretty close. And then the acreage fee runs depending on we've got tech surcharges and whatnot, can run between $60 and $70 for each acre above the 10 acres, which is where you get the fee that Alexander just provided for that large project was around $25,000. And that's intended to, it's difficult for us. We cannot by law charge different developers different fees. And so the acreage kind of modifier is intended to capture that, if you have means enough to do a massive project of 100 acres or whatever, you're going to be in a different kind of bracket economically than someone who's doing a very small scale, project and has the means just to do that. So, because again, by law, we can't charge folks in different circumstances, different fees. We apply it to the size and the scope of the project instead. And in addition, Sarah, just to add real quickly, we've run into this with the larger projects. There might be more site conditions that require more review. With the larger properties, you might run into a lot of environmental features. There's more calculations that have to happen. There's staff involved in doing that review. It's also going to yield a lot more units. You're going to get more units if you're looking at a residential project off of 100 acres and you're off of 5 acres. So.
I would also just add, and I see, I would add, I work in communities across the country. Developers are always going to say the process is too slow. They just are. And that's because they need to make money. That's how they make a living. That's fine. But there's no city I've been to where the developers say, yeah, the city's process is great. We're so happy. And I trust staff to do what they can to move as quickly as developers will allow. I guess just for information for our purposes, what we control, we rarely continue cases. We continue cases. There's a problem with the plan. And it's a blockade to make sure that we're doing things right. And when we've had high caseload, we have done the work to get out of that hole. We've had meetings where we heard 8 rezonings in a single meeting. And I think we even had like a text amendment on the agenda that night as well. It was kind of a wild night, but we've worked to get ourselves out of hole if we need to. So we're trying to play our role to keep the process as efficient as possible while maintaining public interest.
And that's somewhat the point I was going to make that Jeremy Noli made about continuing cases. I think I've been on the commission 2 or 3 years and we may have continued 2 or 3 cases, but I would also say that those were in instances where there was a very specific item that through the discussions, either the developer or staff, there was clarity with regards to needing a little bit more time to address a particular question. It's not, the scenario doesn't happen, or at least it hasn't been my experience, where cases have just been continued because of workload or because of disinterest or because of, you know, a particular perspective on the case under consideration. So I was going to add that comment. And then a question for staff that kind of dovetails on your question about the timing, something that I've heard not just in Durham, but in other locales as well, is to what extent is the planning department's timeline in this larger context affected by input from and reviews from other departments?
So we do share applications and ask that obviously other departments review for their respective fields. There have been times certainly where other departments are having the same struggles we are, with staffing, turnover, et cetera. So what we try and do is be very transparent when that is happening and adjust our timeframes so that we're clear to the development community, you know, regardless of which department is kind of responsible that's having the issue. Our timeframes have changed. We recently, not for rezonings, but for some other processes, ruled out a little, you know, info blurb about, hey, these processes, the timeline is temporarily changing. We're trying to be very clear that it's a temporary change. So we try and do that together as a unit because we try to function as a unit. So yes, occasionally that is absolutely true. That happens.
All right. I was going to ask you another question regarding, so in regards to this mechanism that tracks a case, is there a way that, I'm creating this on the spot here, but you have something digitally displayed online. Is there a way that it can mark when it goes back into the developer's hands? That would be timestamped?
So we have a software platform that tracks our workflows, and we can track from that. You know, we can set up, you know, reminders basically that, you know, there are 90 days coming up on a certain date. That way staff knows to reach back out and say, hey, is this coming back in? I will be honest, the platform that we have is not great. It's really antiquated. And in fact, we're working with the city's technology solutions department to replace it with something that will be a little more user-friendly, have more functionality, allow us to mine data like that back out of it a lot easier without someone having to sit there for 2 hours running a query, which is what happens now. And hopefully maybe even have some easier outward facing capabilities so the public can more easily see the same information we see.
Yeah, I do think that the more transparent it is, I think that's going to solve the accountability issue. Because right now it's he said versus she said, and we get caught in the middle.
Yeah, I get lots of feisty developer emails demanding to know, and I know the administration paid these two, you know, why something is taking so long, and I quickly go into the system and I can show them like, hey, you submitted here, we gave you comments here, it took you this long to get back to us, and then we've still reviewed on time each time, and you know, that usually addresses their concern.
I was just going to tag on very briefly that last year, we put into our CIP program funding to upgrade our overall ERP system, but also our land development office. So it's something that is already in process and something that we have to do periodically. Any organization has to make a decision to invest. I think it's probably somewhere near $10 million that's been invested in upgrading all of our enterprise-wide systems, and it's a funded capital improvement program as of last year.
Thank you so much.
I was just going to make a comment. I think the rollout of the social pinpoint has been really great. Certainly as applicants do come in, and I do point to the public whenever they hear of things. Obviously, a lot of times the developers actually hold community meetings even before they apply. So I don't have any reference point, but the social pinpoint is really helpful for people to get online, take a look at it. And I even use it quite a bit sometimes just to get a better idea of what the applicant is asking for, what is the scope. And it does prepare me before the meeting as well. Also, maybe this is a loaded kind of question is, do you think you could use more funding since we're getting in the budget season?
Next question.
Rhetorical, okay.
Okay. I mean, tools like that are real helpful for helping
Yeah.
us do our work. And so that's what I was thinking. Also not being so dependent upon the applicant fees.
Our college mate, Carmen.
So, a lot of the things that we receive from developers, when they meet resistance from their traffic impact analysis that they're not required to do depending upon the size of the project. A lot of times they come to us with not enough community input, and we don't require a development plan prior to them coming to the application process. So a really large project, they meet a lot of resistance from the planning commission because you're impacting the community that you're not really considering. And you can say, I've had a community meeting and we held them in 2019, but it's 2023, it's 2022, that was 3 years ago. Durham is changing by what, 60,000 people, 60,000 residents. So if your community outreach isn't up to date, then your data isn't up to date. So when we meet resistance with that, I feel like the planning department is catching it because you're submitting things without a development plan. And then when your development plan comes in on the back end, it's inadequate. So it has to go back. If we could review that or have some type of commitment, which a lot of times we have to make adjustments on the fly in the meeting, asking, well, what can you commit to? What are you willing to commit to? And if they're willing to commit it, then we have to update that. But that gives us something to say, okay, we can move this forward if we're comfortable, because we do serve at the leisure of the community. So if we're gonna put the time in it to review it, we wanna make sure that we're putting the best product before the community as well as before the planning commission. And as well as the planning department. So hopefully by the time it gets to you guys, it's an easy go and it makes sense. And I understand that we haven't always created the narrative as individuals when we comment, and I can understand that we're getting better at that, but 8 zoning meetings at night, we start at 5:30 at midnight. I'm exhausted because I teach. So after dealing with middle schoolers all day, I can tell you the last thing I want to do is type or think. So I think that requiring developers to be more upfront and transparent on larger projects is helpful. With smaller projects, it's exceptionally difficult for smaller developers to have to plan for a development plan. So they're not coming in asking to rezone 100 acres. They have a small project, so I feel like their process could be more seamless if they have more of a conversation on the front end. And that's where the text only commitment could be helpful in helping smaller developers, because it is a tool that is way more effective and way more efficient for them to come in. And it'll help solve some of the issues that we're having. And it also would help, I would think it would help the planning department or the monastery.
In terms of efficiencies? Yeah.
You're suggesting require development plan prior to planning commission.
Yes, because it's helpful. On very large projects, it's extremely helpful. Because if you own 1,000 acres, I'm quite certain $80,000 is a drop in the bucket based off what your return will be on what you're developing. So sometimes you've got to make that initial investment on the front end in order to move your project through, because you can't go through 45 days of planning and review and then say, I need you to hurry up and stamp this because I need to get it approved when you're just now submitting your development plan. And it's full. That's problematic.
So can I clarify something about development plans?
Yes.
So we cannot require anyone to use a development plan other than where the ordinance specifically says there's what are called planned districts, those require a development plan. So the idea is they are, planned out districts that have multiple components, et cetera. But a development plan also lengthens the review timeline, because that's when other departments really need to come in and do a hearty review of all those things that are now depicted. So a general rezoning that does not have a development plan has the shortest kind of stacked turnaround timeline. It cuts time from the beginning. So those are just pros and cons I wanted to throw out there.
Any other comments or questions regarding the process for planning from application to approval? All right. We will move on to the next topic. I suspect this will be quite robust. We have Director Johnson here to provide a quick presentation. And while we're waiting, I know you see the attorneys in the room. They are here for us as a resource if we happen to give them a quick bind and need some clarification on something legally regarding any of the discussions that we had. Thank you all for being here as well.
Technology, you have to love it. Well, my name is Reginald Johnson. I have the pleasure and honor of serving as the Director of the Development Department. Community Development Department for the City of Durham is responsible for the creation and the preservation of affordable housing, neighborhood revitalization, particularly our work in homelessness, comes under the department. My role here is to talk a little bit about the Forever Home Durham Affordable Housing Plan and what we and where we are with it. To give a little background, and I have some slides, and be glad to share them with you. Many of you have seen them before, particularly if you've watched the Affordable Housing Implementation Committee meetings or council meetings. But I'll run through the slides. I'm not going to get every one, but it does contain some information that you'll find helpful with you. Thank you for the finding. Next slide. Thank you. So just as a reminder, refresher, the Durham voters approved $95 million housing loan, the largest affordable housing loan in the state of North Carolina. 76% of the vote. And what we did, the city did, is to combine that $95 million with $65 million in existing federal and city funding to make $160 million investment in this called Forever Home Durham. That's affordable housing and services for low-income residents. So this is the breakout. Many of you have seen this before. This was, pre-pandemic, and it was right at the, pattern of the bond, where we had projected different categories of spending and the different areas. Of course, we had a little thing in the middle since then called COVID, and it has, impacted the council, but this is the foundation in which we are going to stick it closely to this. Time of affordable housing, I know we have many experts in the room, but I always like to refresh, so we can orient ourselves to who, when we talk about funding, and create, like who we are talking. So, affordable housing, say, decent housing that is affordable to low income households. Couple of rules of thumb is that the household should not spend more than 30% of the. And then low income is that or below 80% of the area income adjusted by household size. You have a little graphic next time. So this chart reflects what the 2022, which is the current year, the next year hadn't come out yet. Durham Chapter Hill Metro limits. When I'm talking with residences, particularly household with 80% AMI, $76,400. What that means is that everybody in that household added together cannot make more than $76,400 a year. That's what we're talking about. It's not the number one breadwinner. The breadwinner is everybody in the household. So if my grandmother lives with me and she gets a Social Security check, I'm counting, but we're counting that Social Security. So these are the forever home growing goals. I'm sure many of you seen Bill 69. Reserve 800 affordable rental homes. 1,700 homeless persons will be diverted from their housing, provide 400 affordable home ownership opportunities. And then to help 3,000 low income renters and homeowners remain in improve their home, pay $130 million in contracting opportunities for NWPs, support nearly 3,000 jobs in the construction operation with spending over the life of the housing creation at the home Durham. Midway Thursday. Just how we count units and we count services. So units in July 1, 2019, which is the beginning of the first fiscal year, and services delivered on after July 1, and this includes things like conversion, property tax assistance, non-repair, down payment assistance. Not this is the progress today. All right here, the oriented to the slide. So going down to the left side, we have the rental units created. We were creating rental units, rental units reserved. Generally, that's talking about repair, home ownership opportunities created, homeless person. Household stabilized. You see what the goals that we just referred to. And then we have what we have in the pipeline under contract. Under contract, we then with the balance remaining. Then we break it out, together units with DHA. So one of the things about the 95 million is that we have allocated about 58 million to support the housing authority. And their well effort to convert all of the downtown, the downtown plan and convert the 5 developments from the way they do now in terms of their responsibility for the maintenance to a RAD demonstration. And so the gap financing to be able to do that is projected to be 58 million. Government project, and so they're working on that, but we count those separately. Non-DHA, and I'll talk about those in a minute, give you some examples of things that where we are providing, the city are providing the gap finance and developers. And, then the opportunities, that's one we're running through. Second mortgage or down payment assistance program that we're working to get out the, start hopefully in the next couple of months. And then household stabilize, that includes things like eviction diversion. Next slide. This is the highlight of the progress that we made today. Street Apartments, which is right next to the North Carolina Mutual Life Insurance Company building and the transit station. J.J. Henderson Towers, which is the rehab of the J.J. Henderson Tower, which is completed. The housing authority with our system has been able to renovate all 178 units with residents. Walsh Road, 42. That we've been a excellent construction innovation. We were able to land with the traffic chain. And then on the right hand side is basically the service that you can see those. Each one, but I'll refer to the last one, which is the City County Joint Plan on Shelter Coordinated Agency that provides street outreach and county response. Plans for Forever Home Rule 23, we're getting ready to submit our budget. What we submitted, we're going to go through the process with the manager and then later. Things that really we're looking to accomplish in FY24. Phase 2 of the Durham DCLT rehabilitation project will be underway. That's a renovation of some houses, construction of 10 new affordable homes on city on surplus. What is the LT and have that, right? And we're going to issue a proposal to select some complete home membership units on 20 city on surplus lots. And sitting down, I talked about sitting down payment assistance program will be launched to go provide assistance to home buyers. Multi-family production. The following developments will be under construction. Elizabeth Street Apartments, which is part of the Durham Housing Authority. 72 units. Commerce Street Apartments. Hardy Street Apartments. Commerce Street is part of the HA as well. Hardy Street is another vote that's going to help with DHIC. Then Brian Place is also the Ashland Place, which is right next to Willard Street. Willard Street Apartments is going to be 51 units of cities. And the following developments next year are expected to be completed. The JFK Towers renovation, Ross Road that mentioned earlier, and the Fitz Tower Apartments rehabilitation, 14 unit at Cook Road, that's services persons with AIDS and HIV. In terms of the homeless system, developed next year, lead the transition of the homeless system back to pre-pandemic funding levels. There was a great influx of resources to the homeless system because due to COVID, a lot of that was one-time funding. And so one of the things, there were several action steps that needed to be taken in terms of where people reside and how we deal with deep uncongregated living. And so we kind of get back to a new normal because we can't afford to maintain what we were doing during COVID because of that. We wanted to have at least 25% of the people that would exit homelessness into permanent housing, and 25% of people experiencing homelessness to contact entry point. Durham, that's our entryway to exit homelessness without usually an emergency shelter. And then one of the final thing I would just say for this slide, for those who need a data-driven planning and resource allocation discussion for system-wide and simple funding priorities. One of the things we've been extra steps we're doing is to encourage and have all of our nonprofits that work in homelessness to work together. And we've been successful through the Homeless Services Advisory Committee in accomplishing that. There's some things we need to do, but we've been making tremendous progress. For more information, you can go to the Forever website, which is actually there's a link on the community development's webpage. that goes to Forever Home Durham. And, urge you to take a look, see, to see some of the projects and some of the stories that's going on. I want to thank you for your time and, listen.
I appreciate that presentation, it's really helpful for us. I want to be a little careful because I can get really into the weeds about this. This is my day job. I love thinking about different funding for housing and whatnot, but we don't really get to decide on that. We are primarily focused on rezoning cases, and so leveraging the tools that we have to help contribute to the affordable housing that the city is supporting through funding. And yeah, I think that's just like the one thing I want to highlight. We're one recipe in the work that you're doing and that the city is doing to fund affordable housing. We can't do it alone. We can't solve affordable housing through land use or through rezonings. And so I really appreciate and respect the work that the city's done to dedicate funding. The thing that I know about funding is $160 million sounds like a lot of money, but it can drive real quick, especially in our current environment with construction. So I know you all are about to begin budget processes, and I just want you to know, like, you will have my backing in any funding that you choose to promote or dedicate for more housing or affordable housing. The last thing I wanted to note on this is just, you know, we look at rezoning cases, and that's a discretionary approval. And I recently heard that the town of Apex has decided that they're not approving projects that don't include affordable housing. And that's a really powerful statement to make, and the town of Apex can do it, the city of Durham. And I hope that we continue to keep pushing for more through our rezoning process and use every tool at our disposal to address this major need. Question?
Yeah, it might be a good question, but I appreciate that information. So how can Apex do that and we can do? They can't do it. I don't think so. Okay. I didn't think so.
Attorney O'Toole.
Do it.
Yeah, Chair Armadillo stated that.
Well, first, I haven't heard, I don't know exactly what Apex is doing, so I'd like to see that first. The other thing is the city attorney's office gives advice to the Durham City Council. I don't give advice to Apex's town council. Finally, I just say, you know, as part of the mayor's affordable housing deep dive, we gave an overview of the legal landscape. I would say, given the changes in the North Carolina Supreme Court, there's only an exclamation point on the things that I said in that deep dive. I don't know what Apex is doing, but I stand by the advice that our office has given on mandatory inclusionary zoning.
Well said. Thank you. I have a quick question. So this could be, I guess, pretty broad, but Director Johnson, what types of needs would you say are there to increase the completion of our category goals here? Is there more funding? Is there third-party relationships? What do, can we have some pretty ambitious, well, I wouldn't say ambitious, but we're quite realistic, our goals with affordable housing. What do you think we need to better complete those or reach those goals?
Well, you know, I'll be candid with you, there's no question about it, more money. You know, but I was just meeting with some students and new students. They're doing, and they asked me the same question that you just asked. And so, but it's not just that. One of the things that we learned during COVID is that one can receive more money, but if it comes all at the same time, then you have a capacity on the funnel that can go through it. You know, we learned that with the homeless system. So for years, we've been wanting more resources. Well, we had this thing called COVID and more resources came. Just to give order of magnitude, you know, when I started at the department 10 years ago, our budget was about, $4 million. Now it gets up to be about 20. And in the course of 18 months, we received an additional $25 million more dollars. And the question is, how do not just the community development, and we have partners, so the staff is one piece, but then how does the nonprofit community in Durham funnel out that resources as well? That's the part that we also have to also keep in mind, because we do have some capacity challenges. When I say capacity, just number and types of organizations that work to end homelessness. So I say it's the answer to your question is actually both of them. More money as well as improving our capacity. That's one of the things we talk about in our plan. I didn't talk about that, but there's technical assistance money, the technical assistance for some of our organizations. We did some of them through COVID. I provided some assistance to help them make through, particularly those who had investments. We had already made investments in this, and we made investments in the county.
So I have a question. With these resources that you have, how exactly with the partnerships that you've developed, once the funds get to them, how is it being monitored from 2019 to now 2023, and we still have a deficit of 2,413 properties away from the goal that is set to create affordable housing, and not just to end homelessness, but to help Durham residents remain in their home. So what are the barriers to completion? Is it staff? Is the funnel getting clogged? Like how, I just want to understand what the issue is and how we can help.
So I would say these are the barriers. One of them is in terms of the capacity of the department. Another one is the capacity of our community, our nonprofit community to develop. For example, one of the things we've used the resources that we have is to encourage more nonprofit developers or even for-profit developers to engage in 4% tax credit. We didn't have that in Durham prior to the passage of this bond, that we really didn't have any money to contribute to 4% tax rate versus the 9% tax rate. Now, I don't know if I need to go into detail and explain what that is, but that's a significant tool. It's now being used to create create units of additional tools that we as a community did not have, because we didn't have the resources to be able to contribute. You have to contribute more money in the 9%. And we only get 9% tax credit a year in Durham. That's, we talk about how we can help. One of the things we need to do is get the legislature and the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency to figure out a way that we can get more than just one. And that one is competitive. So even if we have one to apply, that doesn't mean that we don't get that one because it competes against other than a similar category. We can walk away with nothing, and that has happened. So that's another reason. I think those are the major reasons. I think we've made some tremendous impacts in the homeless. But the other piece that I would say, COVID has done a number on us in terms of financing. There are projects now that I'm dealing with now that are in need of more money than what was initially projected. And I've shared with the council and made recommendations to the council when we talked with them a year ago, that my recommendation is going to be, let's keep the projects that we have going. And that means we might have to reach in a time, might have to reach in 2 times to keep them going, because I don't want to use the units that we already have that are underway. That's the discussion Keith and I were just talking about today. And so and it's costless. So I understand that where we are with the goals. I still think the goals are admirable and good goals. It may take us longer to reach them, in which one of these, because of COVID, we did extend the time. But I think for our community, it was a good set of goals.
I mean, it's understandable, because I understand personally doing renovations on my own home. Went from $4 to $16. Plywood went from $24 to $56 a board. So that's a hard cost, and you don't want to pass that on to the home buyer, and the city doesn't want to have to absorb any more of it than what it has to. I think that it's commendable, and I better understand now where the blockage is coming from, and these are barriers and things that you can't help, right? Especially when it comes to workforce, especially when it comes to staffing. Some things, that's a pressure everywhere. I think collectively, there's enough brain power in this room that we can help figure that out. And there's definitely enough resources from the planning commission between Chair Amendolia and Vice Chair Cameron that we could probably help navigate that process with some of the developers that are looking to build in Durham. I think that they can offset what they're not getting independently by partnering with Durham, even if now that, since they are for profit, because something has always been better than nothing. And I think that that's a conversation. If legally we can open that up at some point in time. I know the state is currently struggling with that same process with renovating homes throughout the state and finding contractors to do the work. But I think Durham is unique because the interest is in Durham. And I think that we can help that. I am not about complaints. I'm definitely about solutions. And if I got to pick up my nails on it, I will. So I think that this is something that we can solve if we need to. If anyone, I challenge this planning commission is willing, we can figure out resources. We can help, we can meet this goal. Thank you.
Member Williams, can I add one more thought to the earlier answer? I do want to be clear with council. Rezonings are legislative decisions, so that is within council's sound discretion whether to approve a rezoning or not. So when matters come before council, you are free to raise whatever questions and concerns you have about a development. So, for example, a question could be asked: are you proposing to offer any affordable units in your development? If council is not satisfied with the answer received, council is free to reject the rezoning. What I think council needs to be careful about is, I would be concerned if Durham City Council said what Austin just said. And I just tried to find what Apex is doing. I can't find it on the internet, but I think it could be legally problematic if council said, if developments do not include affordable units, we're voting against it. So that's a subtle difference, but that's the legal advice I would offer. You're free to ask questions, listen to the answer, vote accordingly. But I would caution against a rule like Justin suggested. And I'm not sure if that's what Apex is doing.
Thank you, Attorney O'Toole. Well, really quick.
Yeah, I wanted to say thank you to Director Johnson. I think that ties in really well to the land use part of rezonings, which is when we receive a proffer of the own volition of an applicant for affordable housing, what they're essentially proffering is that they're going to be applying for a 4% tax credit in those cases. Very rarely is it something that they're self-funding. So I think that's an important distinction to make. When they're making those proffers, they're going to be applying for a 4% LIHTC tax credit. Sometimes they're going to be applying for gap financing from the city. But that's what the body of that tax commitment or that profitability is.
I just want to add to Don's comments about the conversation surrounding associating a legislative act with affordable housing. I do a fair amount of work in a lot of different locales, but for years, some of that has been in the town of Chapel Hill, which there's no editorializing in any direction by making that reference, but this is a question that always comes up in their conversations. And I would put it this way. If projects are typically approved with no affordable housing proffers or reference to affordable housing, then project applications will continue to be received with fewer and fewer offers of affordable housing. And if projects tend to be approved when there is a reference to affordable housing in some proffer in some form, then that gets noticed by the developer.
David?
I had a couple comments. I was wondering, are there other sources of funding? I may be dating myself, like HUD title grants or anything that we use for, repair or upkeep of people's homes and things like that. I remember that in the city of Charlotte when I was there, we identified areas, but then they were able to pull funds like that from the federal government.
The resources that we have from the federal government, I'm not sure about the program specifically.
Yeah, I don't know if it's still around or not. I may be dating myself, but I do think that there's a program through HUD that actually does a lot of those kind of grants for keeping homes up to code and stuff like that, much like getting a loan. Something to think about. That's all. I was wondering if there's other sources that we're tapping into.
The resources that we do use and what you're talking about and how HUD does it now is through community development block grant and home
Okay, yeah,
funding, which is in the $160 million
okay,
plan that we have. And we actually have it just clear ongoing now.
okay.
And we're getting ready to come out with another RFP, but that's 3 years Habitat for Humanity has been doing.
And the other comment that's good, I appreciate that. The other thing I was kind of waiting to think about as a comment is I kind of make the distinction between affordable housing and neighborhood development. When I think of, when we're trying to make an area affordable or an area affordable, we're also building neighborhoods or we're shoring up neighborhoods. Are we doing anything towards neighborhood development? Because I know, again, I know we're referencing other cities, but when I reference Charlotte, they had a bond for housing, affordable housing, but they also had one for neighborhood development, which would be improving sidewalks, streets, things like that, that are part of the neighborhood and the fabric. Because if we're putting people into homes, we want to have places where they can actually walk to, or, I won't say drive, but anyway, but to be able to get to different places, either transit or things like that. I know that kind of bleeds over into other departments, but is that kind of within scope of what we do here?
Yeah, yes, it is. Here's an example in when we did the south side of the which was really south and enterprise and the former site, Rolling Hills. So a lot of the resources were put into new streets, new infrastructure. There's an interesting story that we had to, first we didn't have to go in and put in, I think we're gonna put in new infrastructure on Chestnut Street. But when we got in and tore it up, it had to be put in new federal resources to be able to pay for that. So that's the context of neighborhood revitalization as an example. But also we do things in this work, people, and I understand if you can think about community development work is about buildings.
Right.
But our work is really about people. One of the things that we do is, help people with training, and I didn't talk about the school project we have in public schools, the training class we just had in construction. or the money that we use to pay for pedestrian crossings in low-mod areas. That we've actually done with our funding. And what we end up doing with public works was finding out what areas, what public crossing that they needed that were down on their list, but in areas that qualified for our funding, we were able to put, done several of them.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to try to get a better understanding.
I appreciate it.
I have some more questions around, as you can see on the agenda, it talks about supply and demand and the economic impact. I don't want us to personally, I feel as though we say affordable housing, period, without context sometimes. So what I'd like to better understand is how can we truly achieve more affordable housing? And that is considering, you know, the market that we're currently in, the process that we currently follow, and all of the idealism that comes around the type of housing we want to see. So we say we want affordable housing, and then it comes to the financing part of it. You know, so we have the resources that we have here, but when I think about the average price of an apartment in Durham right now is $1,400, right, for like a 2-bedroom. That's the average, and to get approved, you have to make nearly 3 times as much. So we are really excluding a lot of folks that have accessibility to having a roof over their heads. And personally, that's also what drives me to a very, very frustrating point when, you know, we tend to prioritize other ideas or whatever over just the basic, can we get a home here? Now, that's oversimplifying it a bit, and I'll use some of the comments that I do see come from our planning commission colleagues and some of you all's advice when you give us. I take those comments and I'm thinking, all right, so this is what they would like to see. And then the reality is, here are how many folks we have out there just trying to get a home. And then I think about the economics of the, you know, the household income versus who's moving here, who oftentimes are, you know, they have a lot more finances. So that is the perplexing situation that I'm dealing with. We want affordable housing, but we have all of these factors on financing it. We have a very competitive market. We have a very aggressive market. I just don't know how we really achieve that goal of the type of housing we want, paying for those types of housing and achieving affordable housing as well. So I don't know how to answer that question, and that is where I'm going. How can we achieve affordable housing with all of the competing factors in our community right now? Who's moving here, the wealth that they have, who's here, the wealth that they have, or not? And I don't know who to throw that question at, because
I think a lot of housing.
They get. I think
this real quick, Austin. I asked that question because we all impact the process. And those costs are forwarded to the tenant at most times. So I think that it somewhat informs the impact of our decisions that we make as well. But
yeah, I think the primary thing I hear when I hear this question is there's a distinction between tenant and owner. And I can't remember the last time we even held up an apartment complex that came through. We're typically thankful to see an apartment complex come through because it's getting one. And especially an affordable one. But even when we've had market rate one, it's been nice to see the density and the walkability and the views that come with it. Most of the cases that we end up proposing on the planning commission are 100% for sale. And because of that, it is highly unlikely that people who are unable to afford a house today are going to be able to purchase this. If somebody is currently houseless, a for sale home is not going to do them any good. They need much more than just a market rate apartment, but they definitely can't achieve a for sale unit. And so when we get a bunch of for sale units that's on hundreds of acres, and we see that it could have more mixes of uses and provide rents at a lower price point, then yeah, we want to see more affordability. But when we see affordable apartment complexes and other rental units that are providing more connectivity, they tend to move through pretty easily. I think that like our record on that is fairly consistent based on the time I've been.
So I was gonna say, if you're just asking in general, without even planning commissioner, former affordable housing developer is, well, first planning commission is reject large developments. That's the word, one that's the process. Second is more land and holding land. With, affordable housing, it would be great if you could get an actual land bank authorities in some type of way where you could get land. So it's nonprofits for development. I'm not talking about, okay, that's not happening. Land trust, so holding land and community land trust, what ECLT does, keep the affordability long term. And then finally, the last thing is long-term affordability fees. What we see in use for low-income housing tax credits, where there's at least a 30-year affordability on it, we need that for sale housing too, because there's an argument that you don't allow someone to sell their affordable house on the market, but at the same time, you preserve that affordable housing for that home ownership. And so those are just points.
And on the backside of that, having worked in design and reconstruction, a lot of times what you want and what you can afford don't line up. So if you've got a price point that you're trying to meet to create affordable housing, then that's where the design creativity has to come in. And you can meet the needs of what the price point is that you're operating in on that budget by creating that inclusive property. You also can offset that by creating sustainable properties so that the burden of electricity and the burden of heating and cooling is not on the homeowner, so they can afford more rent because they're not paying more and expensive. That helps the community and that helps the environment. I think a lot of the tasks of what comes before us are a lot of properties that where the sky is the limit. I had a classmate put 60 properties before us on 11 acres and the starting price was $500,000 in Durham. That's not gonna happen, like that's not gonna work. But you can be creative, you can create effective long-term housing for people who wanna live in Durham. But we can possess the ability to actually hold these titles and say, hey, we're Durham. If you wanna come here and you can't afford to be here, we can help you with that, we can help offset it. We're gonna look at having to do that sooner rather than later with certain housing projects that are about to close. We have the opportunity to be able to go forward and be creative in the design. A lot of times it's not the lumber, it's what goes into the house that makes it expensive. And if we are willing to be developed, if we're willing to go in, and we're willing to create partnerships with Home Depot, with Lowe's, with different lumber companies, to say, hey, you can go into a nonprofit status, you can donate part of the lumber for these projects for affordable housing. These companies can write that off. They don't have to eat that cost. They can show that they're partnerships. They can show that they are willing to help communities. That builds a relationship. That builds an understanding. That helps to solve some of the problems. But we have to be creative. And it's sessions like this that help to make that possible. Because we come to meeting only knowing what we get from the planning department. And the planning department knows what they get from developers. If the common goal is to make affordable housing, then we have to bring what we have to the table. And I know that the design process is what drives up the costs.
So just real quickly, and I apologize because I have to leave in about 10 minutes to go teach a class in the Duke Environmental Leadership Program in Sustainable City. So I'm going to ask them your question because it's a really difficult question. And I guess I think I would try to frame it in two ways. One, there's housing and affordable housing, and there's supply and demand. And we've kind of got these kind of cross conversations occurring, and we have a limited set of tools that we can use. And I applaud what the city has done, focusing on everything that you just described. I applaud what planning department has done in years past on expanding housing choices and the direction of what the comprehensive plan and engaged Durham is kind of moving towards. And the points out of that I think are relevant to your question and to this conversation. We have to put housing where people want to be. But we also have to put the type of housing that matches the types of households in the right locations. And that distinction, I think, is really important in the context of the narrative that has existed probably for several years, for many years, with kind of any potential disconnect between Durham Planning Commission and what council may be inclined to do. And part of it is because of the way in which housing is produced in the market economy. The design firms, the real estate investment entities that are out there is very much targeted towards producing predominantly two types of housing: multifamily housing or single family housing that's as, a really specialized size, as many of those as they can produce. And those two types miss a huge part of the demand of what we need in Durham, a huge part of the demand of what we need in a lot of locales. And so I would just say that the continued focus of the planning department, of the planning commission, of your leadership, is needed to kind of remind everybody in this conversation that every little bit helps. Every little bit of incremental housing helps. And my hope is that as the comprehensive planning process kind of winds down and we move into rewriting the ordinance, that, and I think this gets back to how you started the conversation with the question about the timeline. I hope is that we can move towards more clarity in the ordinance to the extent the land use ordinances can match up with what our needs are. More clarity so that the private sector developers and the nonprofit housing providers are doing the things that our community needs. And maybe some of those projects that take a really long time to get through the pipeline don't match up so well, because we have a lot of that. We see a lot of that come before us every month.
Yeah, support a lot of the comments that have been made by Keith. Agree a lot with Commissioner Seats just said. I think philosophically, we want development that we want to have happen be really easy. We want that to be easy. We want development that we don't want to have happen hard. And that's sort of like a lens to view our UDO, which is, we don't build a city, right? Like as public sector, we build a few units here or there. Predominantly what's being built is being driven by private developers, but we get to shape that development. We have the ownership of the DNA of the city. Is the UDO is our zoning. So housing isn't, sometimes we treat it like boxes of cereal. But housing is inextricably linked with neighborhoods and with the city and with parks and with retail. And you want to go to the grocery store and you got to take your kids to daycare, and you got to go to your job. And if we're just talking about housing, we extract housing from that full conversation of how does it fit in the context of the broader city. I think that we're missing some key pieces. We need to build a sustainable, equitable, dense, compact city with lots of green space and all of people's needs. We need to make sure that when Commissioner Seats talked about this, different developers are operating in different spaces. So when we're talking about 40, 50, 100, 150 acre parcels in Southeast Durham, we're talking about the big guys, Pulte Group, Lenara Homes, funded by institutional investors who want low risk over, sometimes over high reward. And they sort of stamp down these same developments all over the country. You go to Loudoun County or, outskirts of Atlanta and see the same thing. I've talked to these guys and I've said, like, how do we make you build more compact, walkable development? They're like, we're not going to do it unless you make us do it.
And we have the power of zoning. We have the power to be able to make these big guys out there build a more sustainable, equitable development. And so I think that we need to be using that power in the right way. And I think that we need to use completely different tools when we're talking about where water and sewer and streets are already in existence. So our infill development needs to be much more fine-grained and thought through ahead of time for the smaller, more local developers. So just thought there.
Thank you. I'm glad you made that comment. So
This real quick, so Greensboro is developing.
Greensboro is developing their own, again,
Greensboro is developing their own.
so we just a couple of comments in regards to what you stated. Are we sending the message, and this, I'm asking for clarity, are we trying to send a message that building generational wealth through home ownership is no longer a priority? Are we sending the message that we just want to build rental properties for now because of the crisis that we're in?
I don't know that that's the message that is being sent, but I definitely think that it's arguable. I guess the better question is how or what are we doing to help residents that are here remain here? Because that's where the generational wealth comes from, because a lot of the elders in the community that are vested can't afford to renovate their home so that they're livable, which creates the ability for them to be possessed or left or abandoned. A lot of people have kids move away, those houses get acquired. And then they get redeveloped. So how do we keep residents in Durham? A lot of people have left Durham because they can't afford to be here anymore. A lot of people face a lot of hardships. But when I looked up there and I'm looking at $56,000, that's 80% of AMI. It's a lot of broke teachers in Durham. It's a lot of broke teachers in Durham, and they're paying rent. So how do we bridge the gap of outreach so that generational wealth is the goal? But we got to take care of what's here. We're worried about what's coming. What's here is what's important. So we got to take care of making sure that people that are paying property taxes can remain in their home. That helps with homelessness. So right now, not to overshadow Durham because I'm a lifer. However, there's a lot of homelessness taking place in Raleigh right now because people can't afford, since those forbearances on mortgages are now up by the government, the homeless rate is increasing. It's exploding, and that's gonna be contagious. That's gonna be the case. Layoffs are taking place. What's driving a lot of people living in Durham is tech. So what are we prepared to do when those tech layoffs start to hit and they start to roll in the rolling recession? What are we going to do? I didn't know about the program that's out there to help people with their home. I didn't know it was an option, but I should. I live here. So I think that that's how we can help to bridge the gap. New construction is wonderful. I love it. Don't love townhomes. But whatever it takes to make sure that people can remain here, and we need to create an environment of sustainability in how we build and develop Durham. And it's not just about the environment. Are we building products and creating opportunities that people can live in? Or is it going to be a continuous 5 to 6 or 7 year cycle of individuals that are living here and then they're moving elsewhere? And now we have vast properties that are empty. How do we address that? What's the forethought of the planet beyond right now?
So, real quick, all right, because I would like, so I'm with you and I agree. I don't know how we control folks from coming here. And I don't know how we control their wealth, which means in turn, I can't control if a private property owner wants to sell their property. I look at insurance all the time. So I don't know how we control that. And I don't know if there's a legal way that we can, Because I hear that a lot, we need to take care of the folks that are here. And I think that when you are living in Durham, then you are the folks that are here. How do we keep them here? And it appears we have one of the most robust efforts in the state for affordable housing, and it's still not enough. Our General Assembly is sitting on the sideline. Federal government is sitting on the sideline, other than poor policies called public housing. I don't know how we actually do that. I want to get beyond the way it sounds and actually determine how we do it if we can. So, and I also made a comment that we have the power of zoning. I want to go a little more in detail about that, because everyone on this council, when we make that ultimate decision, we're making the best decision we possibly can at that time. So I don't know if any staff want to jump in on that and help clarify, because I don't want to leave this meeting with phrases without context.
Thank you. Thank you all for a really great discussion tonight. Nate, I want to revisit the whole power thing and the power to make developers do what we want them to do. When a vote is before me, I can vote yea or nay. It's a zoning decision. That's the actual, if you start substituting variables, that is the way in which we exercise power. So I'm serious, because I'm intrigued by what you said. I want you to help me. Is there an American city right now that's exercising power, that's making big developers do what they want them to do, that we can be in conversation with and see how they manage to do that? And what types of things look like what you just said that we should vote for, that will not signal to a highly activated North Carolina legislature that we're engaging in the back of a moratorium? Help me in a very concrete way.
I mean, I think that we need new zoning districts. Yeah, I mean, cities all over the country do this, yeah. So,
And
the zoning district has standards, it has uses, it has dimensional standards, it has all of these different things within it, right? It's kind of like, all right, you're in this zone, these are the things that you need to do to build out your development. So if we have the right zones that developers can select from, then they can come to the table and say, all right, we're gonna arrange our development in a more sustainable, compact way.
There it is again, the right zones. There are things you can do by right. And oftentimes what we find ourselves doing is managing outcomes, because what can be built there oftentimes is much further away from our values and our vision of what we want to be than the leverage we can exercise through rezoning. Something's going there. A no is a yes to something. So I ask you again, when you say right, because it sounds almost like with our professional planning staff, with all the brain power we have, with all the council members that we have, it sounds like you're suggesting we're just not getting it. We're just not doing the right thing. We're not pulling the right lever or pushing the right button. We're not reading the law, the legal landscape correctly. So I ask you again in a very direct way, what does that look? What are we not doing that we should be doing as a city that we can legally do? What are we missing?
Well, I'm certainly not making all of those accusations against our staff, but I do believe that we have we have a lot of opportunities to create more sustainable development.
Like what?
Like, I think that we should have shorter block lengths. I think we should ensure that people can walk to places that they need to get to. I think that we need to be requiring a mix of housing types. There are all different sorts of standards that we can put in place that can be incorporated into the zoning regulations. You talked a little bit about the zones that are on the ground, and you have this decision or this decision. And one thing that I think would make it much easier for the council is if you weren't deciding between a broken zone that's already on the ground and a different zone that might not be what we think is best, or what council thinks is best. So like, council can proactively rezone stuff. So if there are zones on the ground and you're saying, I don't like that zone, so like we have to zone it to something else, then you should go ahead and proactively rezone that property. Cities do that all the time. It's very normal. Cities all over the state of North Carolina do it. So if you're saying that there's a zone on the ground and we don't like it, so therefore we gotta zone it to something else, even if it's imperfect, That's sort of creating this dichotomy it's not real. We don't have to always deal with that dichotomy. We can start with a better zone that's on the ground.
Hey, didn't you just mention when we talk sometimes about this, is to take a broader area, say, for instance, an area of neighborhood, not just a parcel or an application, just to change a certain area, you know, like when we were talking about Southeast Durham or so, wouldn't it be nice if we had just kind of zoned it and just said, these are the zones in these areas, and then the developers then can build their parcel applicant by applicant? That would almost shorten the time itself, but it would also allow for, you know, looking at that area from a holistic perspective and saying, this is what we want in this area, like North Durham or Southwest Durham, something like that.
It'll last along with the current council. I mean, any council that comes along, this isn't.
Yeah, I
it's not
understand.
It's not static. It's not.
But it doesn't have to be completely dynamic, like that, just maybe an area that we see that we're gonna see future growth. Something like that.
Yeah, so these are some of the things that, and I see it in a lot of your own comments, this is why I'm raising it. And it's being mentioned tonight. So to be clear, I think sometimes planning commissions the planning commission sometimes makes assumptions about what we know or don't know. That we are not aware of certain trends, or we're not aware of certain powers, that we are not aware of certain processes or protocols or whatever. And at least for me, it's something that if somebody told me at 45, I would be as obsessed with land use and transit as a former teacher that I am today, I would have laughed at them. It is something I read about obsessively. I consistently am in the future. Because to me, land use is an extremely important component of affordability, period. I'm fascinated by what's happening out in California, because for a very long time, small communities, very affluent, limited their supply. Now the state has just gone and pretty much stripped all local power in many municipalities in California, because they weren't keeping up with supply for the basic population. And we actually feel that because we are, you know, California is a state that's losing population, and North Carolina is a state that is receiving a lot of that. Charlotte, Raleigh, and Durham were all in the top 10 fastest growing cities in the United States. That's not one. Austin's on there too, right? There's 3 cities in North Carolina, and Raleigh and Durham are next to each other. So y'all can imagine the pressure we're going to face for the next 10, 20. So I just want you all to know that, at least from my individual perspective, I spend a lot of time on this. I spend on JCCPC. I ask for developer partners a lot, you know, to Commissioner Baker's point, and I think often to Commissioner Amendolia's point. You know, when I see this, we need more diversity in the stock, which I agree with. I want missing middle housing. I think that that's how you build density. I think it's smart. If you go to any older industrial city in this country, you see it. Pre-World War II, it's pre all the things we say we don't like, cars and big roads. There are so many other barriers besides our zoning power that prevent us from doing that. So when I asked the Lennar home, which I've very bluntly said, I want to see a development that is not just single use, like just single family. When are you going to spend something that has some triplex and plus? And they're right. The financing around that, and then the building code around that, is actually a huge barrier for that. So it's not just what we're seeing in that case, it's other things that are beyond our control. And I have had very candid conversations, and I do want to push on some of these building codes. And I know there's other municipalities that are really interested in why are we in commercial code when we're building 3 and 4 units. That seems ridiculous. It's a huge expense. It prevents a lot of our middle income. How do we think about the financing so that somebody who wants to build a duplex or a triplex isn't carrying the burden when it's just essentially repaying through? What you're doing is creating a for rent entity. You're not doing that for sale. The other unit, you're taking the risk as the primary developer and offering a second unit for rent or a third unit for rent, because otherwise you're getting into like the condo financing structure. And that is overwhelming for a lot of a lot of developers and a lot of folks are just not going to offer it. So what I'm interested in doing is figuring out what are the levers at the state that we need to do around financing and around our building code. Because I absolutely want what most of you all want at the table, but I'm also a realist. And I realize what the barriers are, and we have to work together. And I don't think by turning things down consistently, we're gonna get what we want. We have gotten a lot from our developer community. Is it enough? Absolutely not. Will we keep pushing? Yes. But the certain communities that were built out in Southeast Durham would not get approved by this council if they showed up with what they're offering right now. Some of the key development of the Fendel Farm, those would have been turned down if you had the same thing today. And so I just want to offer that to you all, to think that we consistently think, or I consistently think, we think a lot of us, a lot of intentionality, a lot of thought, and absolutely be concerned about. I need more. That's why you're seeing actual units, affordable units, no longer just money to do what's harvest, but money in the development. I guess my question is, with the proposed thing you just said, legally, what are the legal ramifications for us doing something? You said it's being done on places, and I know, we don't like to be clear, but for me, I mean, again, I know we need to build, but I also believe the fact that I want to keep my people. And how you do generational wealth, is if you have somebody that owns a home now, usually they leave that home, if they have it, to their kids. But they can't do that because they're losing it before they even pass, because they think they can't even afford staying. So I'd like to know, because I also am solution focused, so what can be done? If you're saying this can be done, again, I'm learning a lot. I need to know what is the legal ramifications for that to be done, the things that you say, the things that are in places here.
And to be clear, I mean, we're free to have a unified development ordinance, just like we do. I don't need to deflect this question to the planning department, but to be quite honest, I'm not sure what exactly Commissioner Baker thinks the planning department should do differently in the unified development ordinance. And the one thing that I've heard the planning director consistently say, presumably the city council and the county commissioners are going to adopt a new comprehensive plan this year. The next step is to adopt a new unified development ordinance. I would think the new UDO would incorporate a lot of the goals that are encompassed in the new comprehensive plan. So as far as legal impediments, there's no impediment to the city having a unified development ordinance. I'm not sure how it can be improved. That's for professional planners to decide. And obviously at the end of the day, elected officials to approve.
Well, if I can chime in, we are super excited about rewriting the ordinance. I think that is understatement of the century. And we've got a lot of ideas. We, as staff, we are always tight on resources, right? And we are always doing the body work as best we can with the resources we have. But we also constantly keep kind of a list of what are the things, we have our own wish list of ways that our ordinance, should work better, things that we would like to see done. I have anyone that's asked me about the UDO rewrite, and I've told them that my perspective is we got a lot of good, predominantly environmental things that exceed minimum state standards that I intend that we should keep, maybe refine, but keep. And then we have a whole bunch of things that we need to toss out, like all our zoning districts, and rewrite zoning districts that align with the comprehensive plan, the place types, and the types of development that we want to see. And there's a lot more fine-grained work that we can do in that. So I'm super excited to get into that. That hopefully everyone can appreciate that is a monumental task. That is not a task that staff has been able to tackle in little omnibus band-aids throughout the years. That is really a task where you have to stop and holistically look at everything, clear the slate, and start over. And that's why we haven't been able to accomplish something of that scope until now.
Thank you. Director Young, real quick, are y'all thinking you're gonna kind of with like the comp plan will be adopt certain specific things as like a enrollment adoption so we don't have to wait for the whole thing, or have y'all had any thoughts around that?
We haven't, and we want to. Part of it is, while we have a lot of experience in our own community, we are looking forward to bringing someone who has done this in other places. The UDO we have now, the original UDO, was written by a consultant. And they brought us, I was on that team, and they brought us a lot of new ideas from other places. Things that ironically we see in the ordinance now, and we're like, this is dumb. Why do we do this? You know, it worked for us at the time, right? And it was a new concept. So we're excited about bringing somebody in that has different perspective, different experiences. So if we want to wait and see what they may bring to the table and talk, you know, collaboratively about what is the best way to, you know, we need to look at what the structure of the ordinance is going to be like. One of my big pet peeves about the ordinance is that it's really not user friendly. If it confuses my own staff as to how it should be applied, of course it confuses the public, right? And so we just need to make it a little more plain language, a little more accessible, or a lot more accessible. There's a whole lot caught up in there. So I don't have an answer, but I think that's one of the things I want to tackle with a consultant. What is strategically the best way to kind of unroll this? Thank you.
And if you need, I know with the comp plan, we have to do additional resources, so I just on the record saying, ask them what you need, because I know it's a big undertaking.
Thanks so much for that explanation, Sarah. And until that rewrite is done, the reality is there are real-time decisions that have to be made in context right now with the rules that we have. And it's clear to me that beyond land decisions, there are obviously some prevailing economic theories undergirding some of our views on some of these things. You know, it's not just about land use. It's how do you view our macroeconomy as a region, our microeconomy as a city. When folk who are moving here, if they decided to stay here and they've got the means, they're going to live somewhere. What I'm concerned about is not fully embracing, and I think I saw economics on here, the economic impact of folk with disposable income who we say no to over here, but then come closer to our city center with their disposable resources and their income and still impact us. Because we say no, it's still a yes somewhere else. Particularly if they decided they're going to be here, they have to be here because there's a job here. And sending that buying power further to our inner city or to other areas that are already under pressure. I can't wait for the UDO to be rewritten. But until then, we are in combat right now. We have real world decisions right now. And the economic realities that impose themselves, the market realities that impose themselves on us right now. And I think that, you know, it's clear. Some of us have views, our vision of what we want our city to look like. And some of us have different economic views and grasp of the economic dynamics at play with a decision. Yay or nay, either way we go, it's still impacting us in some way or another. So I think that, you know, I would say, you know, the folks a little on for everybody, a little humility is always helpful in terms of looking at some of these decisions. Because even our no's are yeses somewhere else in the city. And we've seen it time and time again. And one of the lessons we've learned from Southside and Rolling Hills development is that very often government action can exacerbate gentrification and further in ways you wouldn't even have imagined. So as you know, as we look at these decisions, while I'm anxiously awaiting a rewrite of the UDO, I don't have the luxury or the legal authority to make decisions or cast votes based upon what's coming or what's hopeful without awakening the attention of a legislature who watches Durham like a hawk, thinking that we're engaging in a moratorium. That's a whole nother set of problems that wouldn't be on the planning commission's radar, but certainly would be on ours as a challenge. So this is a great discussion. I really do appreciate this discussion. Thank you.
Any other comments? Other comments? I appreciate.
Well, I like Yeah, and I think this was a great discussion, but for me to move forward in some of my informed decision, I guess coming up with strategies so that in a way, I know we all have different things, but that we're working together for the better of the cause of trying to make sure that we get as much housing that we need, sustainable housing, all of that. But I know for someone who's appointed in May, I look at your comments and I read those comments and it informs me to be able to sometimes make a decision. And so I guess I've always been to focus, like, how do we move forward to continue to, because we all have different opinions, but to continue to work together, because all of us want the betterment for the residents in Durham. So how do we do that? And for me, it's a little frustrating, because it's saying, we gotta build, but then I get calls from people in the community. I was at a meeting the other day, 3 people were evicted for $50. For $50. So where can we go to, like, I don't know, I guess I just want some actionable things that we can work on, to move forward. I don't know.
All right, so, and just to that comment, that tonight was just for us to have some dialogue. In my perfect world, this is kind of like, this is the room. This sort of reflects how I may call or text some of you all and say, hey, what was up with that? Or, tell me what you were thinking, or thank you for, really providing some scrutiny to that case. I think it's gonna make it better for when they come to us. I do use you all in my process of thinking as definitely a filter to sort of shape the project. And if I'm being at all honest, I do get frustrated with some of you all as well, because I don't think that you see things through the same lens that I ultimately have to see it. Now, that may be selfish, but when I think about, when it's like, hey, we have, as of right now, I believe it's 10,000 people on a waiting list for housing, public housing in Durham. And those are Durham residents, and then we have folks that are coming here. Sometimes we have our advocacy talk and we put it in void of actual logical fact. And that does frustrate me. That's why I wanted us to come together tonight. And if there are no more comments about this.
I'm sorry, after work, one of my students, for those who know, I'm a professor, and one of my students sent me something the other day and said, they got a condo and we got a big, it's spray painted somewhere in Germany. I just want to leave that there.
Who were they?
What do you mean? I don't know. I just know it's spray painted somewhere. The student sent it to me. So it's somewhere spray painted and it says they got condos and we got evicted. So I'm just, one of my students sent to me. I'm trying to figure out where that is. But say that again. Okay, because one of my students said, wow, so I'm just leaving that.
Yeah, and I don't want that to go in, I don't want that to go unchecked. Because we are a governing body. And whoever's spray painted that to say they, unless we know what they're talking about and who they are. Yeah, we can assume, but as the government, we're responsible for being responsible. And that goes all the way to our comments, it goes all the way to our deliberations, advice, and final decisions. I personally know what they may be insinuating, but I just, I think that segues into the last topic here of our working relationship together. And, anytime we, as we are going through this process, it's not like we have a decision to accept housing or not, but we do mitigate that. We do shape it as it comes through this legally binded and legally provided process. And relationships matter. And anytime that we do not allow something to be shaped and then provided, we also can't say we want affordable housing. Because I do think supply and demand is a real thing that has to be considered. And we have a heck of a lot more people in this city that need a place to live than what we have to offer. So we have to, I personally feel we have to determine what our priorities are. Is it going to be the type first? Or is it going to be the what? Are we going to bring housing and then shape it the way we need it? Expanded housing choices passed some time ago. It opened up, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steph, but it provided an opportunity to provide more options, right? We're still not getting them, but it provided the opportunity. So I think that's an opportunity for us to start, really building those relationships. And in regards to building relationships, it was quoted today. I've been saying it forever. Don't criticize teachers for talking about education. We don't criticize doctors for practicing medicine. So why are we treating development totally different? Unless somebody in this room is going to go and build, why are we burning that bridge? Now, I personally can't tell anybody what to do. I can't tell you all planning commissioners what to do. I can't tell my colleagues what to do. We are elected, you're appointed. But at the end of the day, we're doing the people's work, or we're not building. And some of the things that I've personally seen come through does not help the relationship that we're trying to do, that we're trying to build in this city. So in regards to our working relationship, I personally am not in the business of burning bridges. I'd rather build them and build better relationships. Everybody has a choice to do that on their own. But I do want to make sure that we can have an open line of communication. I would like for us to be, of course, cordial as we are. And it shouldn't be any surprises of understanding the process that we have to go through with our planning staff and following the law and all of those things. And I think that we can do all of that, which is what we're required to do, while also standing up our values. I really think we can. So I will continue to call many of you and text you and meet with you just to kind of get a better understanding of what's coming and utilize our process as a means to scrutinize and really shape what's coming before us so we can provide it for the people we're building. Those are my comments.
I love this is the first time hearing my voice. But I enjoyed tonight's conversation. I hope that we have more. I'm optimistic that something will come out of this that, maybe new and, blueprint, or maybe we'll find a blueprint from another city that's done it correctly. It's a huge problem. There's so many reasons that we got to this place. A lot of it is, the fact that no houses were built for a decade during the recession. So it's just so many things that have gotten us to this point. But I am hopeful that we can continue to have this conversation because we do across this, panel and with you all and with, the help of legal, we have a ton of experts. So, I'm looking for having this for opening up this discussion.
I would kind of agree with that because we had one about a year and a half ago, right before. And I thought that was a really good, I know it was all virtual, but it's great to be face to face here. But I do think that we do need to do that on a regular basis. It seemed like it took too long to get a second one going. We probably should do it on either every 3 or 4 months or every 6 months, something like that, just as a good way of syncing up because the board change, the commission change turns over quite a bit, a lot of new faces since I've been on the board. And so I do think that on the commission, so I do think that there is opportunity to have a dialogue and to work through the issues that we've kind of discussed tonight. And I think that's how we build the relationships. I know I've met with different ones of you. I know I haven't met with others, but I would like to. One of the things I suggested to Chair was to kind of pair us up with a council person. Maybe there's 14 of us and 7 of you, so maybe 2 to 1, and we don't overpower you. But I mean, maybe that's another way to kind of help build the relationships better. But I think, like I said, these kind of joint meetings are really good to air issues and things that are facing us.
You said that you're sort of frustrated with the feedback that you get locally do. How do you envision that feedback coming to you in a way that will allow you to use it constructively?
I'm not frustrated necessarily with the feedback. I'm frustrated with some of the behavior. I'm more so frustrated with sometimes with the behavior. And what I mean by that is, you know, we're all working for the same reason. And I don't care who is coming through our pipeline. I definitely don't agree with them all the time. I think that we have to have a certain standard of reform. And I do think that it makes the job a little hard sometimes when we do have these developers coming before us and we're trying to build a culture. And I'm really careful how I say this, because I don't want to get in a field of quid pro quo types of things, but we want to set a culture where we can get the best out of the project for the cases coming before us. And I don't think that, you know, that's always the case. I don't think it's intentionally all the time trying to burn the bridge, but I'll use Nick's comments for example. I call him the copy paste comments because he says the same thing every single time. And he stated it tonight. I actually agree with him. I want that, but it does get frustrating when it's like, how do we make that happen? And I think Councilmember Holian asked that tonight, and that's sort of what motivated me to want to have a conversation with you guys tonight. How do we make that perfect situation happen? How do we, when it's inner city, how do we make it walkable, connected, kids, and stable? How do we do all those things with the circumstances that we have before us? And that is the question that I want answered. And we started going through that. It appears that we are one of the most, as I said before, one of the most robust municipalities for affordable housing in the state. That's still not enough. We make phrases or we say things without context. And I want to get to how we actually make it happen. That's what we're left with when it comes to the decision in full council. So you all have the luxury of advice. We have the reality of making that kind of decision. So that's what it is. So that's what I'm saying is frustrating is what we have to make a decision with. And that's not just your advice, it's part of the overall decision we have to make. I think awesome.
Yeah, and I want to be cognizant of time and respectful of everyone's time. I do want to kind of summarize some thoughts I had about a lot that we just talked about. First off, if any city council member or elected official has a problem with the forum of the planning commission, right? Planning commission member, like, please reach out. That is my role, is to be the public representative of the planning commission. And so if you have a problem with the behavior of a member or of the planning body, please call me up. I want to emphasize the fact that we are a planning commission, and that planning is an incredibly broad topic. I went to planning school and I specialized in economic development, where we learned about supply and demand and economic realities and microeconomics. It's economic development planning. It's part of my field. And so when we see cases, we are looking at it from a planning perspective, including housing, economic development, land use, design. There are so many factors that we bring into that, and our expertise reflects that. We have design folks, we have real estate folks, we have affordable housing developers, land use planners, affordable housing and economic development consultants. We're all community members, but we have a lot of expertise that hits on all of these areas. So I feel confident that when we provide a recommendation that we are keeping everything possible in mind when we make that recommendation. You know, I love to emphasize the fact that we are an advisory body, and it's very clear. We are advising you all based on our professional expertise and our professional experience. And we respect and recognize you all get to decide whatever policy direction you want. That is the reality of the system we live in. And it has its pros and cons. Its pros is that projects get to move forward and things get to get built because they have a less burdensome process. Some may say there are cons to it because it's one less check on development. that can be in the way. But we respect that we are an advisory body. We likely will not always agree. We may not start agreeing more after this meeting. But we want to make sure that we will be doing our best to advise you in the way that we see best. And the last thing I would just say is, you all know, every time I see you, one of the last things I say is, let me know if you need, feel free to reach out. I'm always open to me. So, and I say that to the staff too. You need anything, let me know. I'm happy to talk, to brainstorm ideas, try to move forward. That's why.
Thank you. I wanted to first apologize. I was triple booked this evening and I've been trying to manage. But I did want to make sure I got here, so I was excited to hear you still going. And Chris said that I really wanted to say I thank you. I appreciate, I'm probably one of the few council members who appreciate really how dedicated you've been in hearing the cases and being very vigilant about what we need as a community as a whole. I appreciate each and every one of you different and expertise areas. I know that there are folks on this commission who are building, who are developing, who support development, and I can appreciate every angle and aspect of how you all come together in a very diverse way to represent the county and the city of Durham as we do.
I just want to say thank you. I have met with some of you. I always make the first I ask, so do not feel like you not reach out and ask this time. We'll be up. And appreciate your service to the city. If you are one of the biggest boards, with those meetings, that's you do it for free. So that's a little bit well. But thank you all.
Appreciate the service. And thank you so much for the time. I know the hours upon us. I want to say, I don't feel any particular exacerbation between our relationship at all. Because I understand roles. When I look at your work product, when I look at your comments, I mean, I know the difference between advice and advocacy, and I just kind of read it that way. But I don't feel any, I mean, I've been an employer and I've been an employee. I'm an employer and I've been an employee. And I understand roles. And I understand, the difference between advisory and decision making. So I don't ever, it ain't personal. None of this is personal. I will say, however, that with respect to the expertise on the board, because I've heard it appealed to a number of times. And I want to speak to the unique role of a council, of a deliberative body, of an elected body. The president of the United States is the commander in chief of the United States military. He can't drive an aircraft carrier. He can't land a jet. He doesn't know how to throw a grenade. He's a head diplomat. He can't speak Chinese. But when those people are around him and give that, what he does do is capture the values and the collective wishes of the people that elected him. So because you have expertise in it, and some don't, some do. That's not really what this job is about. We weren't elected to be planning experts. We have a whole department with credentials similar to that. At any time, if you want to go from advice to advocacy, you should run and present those credentials to the people of Durham and to the electorate and see what they say. So for an elected body, we're not called to be experts in filling potholes or pulling over cars and writing tickets. That's not the nature of this job. We are called to be the voice, the collective will and wishes of the people of Durham after receiving the best advice that money can buy, including voluntary advice as well, and then make a decision based upon that. So I think it's really important not to conflate that. There's only 7 of us on the council. We make decisions about areas that far reach 7 areas of expertise. We will never mathematically be able to have an expert in every area that we legislate and make decisions in. That's not the nature of this job. So with that said, I thank you so much for your service and look forward to continuing the debate. This is Durham. This is what we do. We get at it and we make decisions. Thank you, Councilman.
So I just want to also say, for someone who was employed in the name and nothing about zoning, annexing, operating, all of that, I appreciate, so I'm gonna put study stuff got it. But I appreciate the comments. I appreciate number one, me and myself, I've been on many boards. the time to take out of your daily lives to be on this. I appreciate it. And I actually do read the stuff that you put down. And so I just wanted to say thank you so much because your comments and your passion and your advocacy has allowed me to be able to be a little bit more informed in making some of my decisions. So I want to say thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we all really appreciate y'all's work. Yeah, I certainly do, even when I don't vote the way I can advise us to vote. I do always read everyone's comments. It's one of the first things that I look for in our packet is how did the planning commission vote and what did people say? I find it really useful and informative to get that feedback from y'all and be able to rely on your expertise alongside of that of our planning department. It is really helpful and we really appreciate it. And we're coming from different perspectives and different, there are different motivating factors for the city council to think. There are different realities that we have to consider. There are different there are different people in our ears. There's different, conversations that are happening. And so I agree. I don't feel like, I don't feel frustrated. I don't feel like there's, I don't feel like I didn't come into this meeting thinking like, this is a meeting where we're like, oh, you have a problem. We gotta run this problem, right? I feel like we all want the same thing. We all care about our community. We all want, we all want housing that is safe and accessible and affordable and sustainable for our people. And we're all just figuring out how to get there. And sometimes we make hard choices. Sometimes y'all make hard choices, and there's no perfect solution in this, in our economic system or in our particular moment of extreme growth and change. Durham's not the only city dealing with this problem. This is everywhere in the country right now, and everyone is struggling to figure out how we make sure that everyone in our communities has the human right to housing, given that housing is not being built primarily by actors that are predominantly interested in well-being in the community. It's being built predominantly by actors who are interested in making money off it. And so we are, it's kind of the struggle bus. But I think we all want to head in the same direction. And I really appreciate y'all's service and the work that you do and your time in helping us to understand these pieces of the industry perspective. It is really, really helpful and important.
And I encourage my colleagues to reach out to planning commission colleagues and vice versa. Some of you all I know I haven't had a chance to speak with or speak out with or talk to, but I hope we can get there and just really appreciate being in this tough space, doing this good people work. So I don't have any other comments. If anyone has any comments, it's after 8 o'clock. I didn't realize it until 8:03, but if not, I'll pass it on to our mayor.
I'd like to thank you all for what you do. I value your expertise, the lived experience, and your being here on the commission. I'm hoping that we will have further dialogue. Thank you to our staff who have been with us all day today, couple of months, and thank you all for continuing to look energized this evening for the time to go home. Thank you all for being here tonight, and everybody have a great night. Give out.
Hello. Please, how do you leave? You have a microphone? I do. There were two.